Welcome to the Hockey Writers Sabres Scoop, a weekly show with our top Buffalo Sabres writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the Sabres. So get a pen and paper and turn up the volume. You're about to get the Sabres Scoop. Sabres Scoop.
Welcome to Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers, a once-a-week show covering all things Buffalo Sabres and NHL hockey. We thank you for joining us today, and to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, be sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. You can find us on Twitter at SabresScoop, THW, and everything else at The Hockey Writer. You also got to make sure you head over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter, so you don't miss out on that latest and weirdest hockey news every day. But today, you may notice Brandon, my regular co-host of Sabres Scoop, is not with me today, but we are, however, joined by Walter, also known as @Sabermetrics on Twitter. So I appreciate Walter coming on, because we're going to be diving more into the analytical side of Sabres hockey today, because the two of us we're a bit of nerds ourselves, I would say. You know, we all love the charts. We love looking at the RMPM charts and stuff like that. I had to ask you this though, Walter. How does it feel to see Philly fans already complaining about Risto today?
I mean, I think I warned them about it enough, and now they finally get to see that he wasn't just bad just because he's on the Sabres. So we'll see how they could handle a couple seasons of him.
Oh yeah, he's like bad on both those goals against Phillies playing Boston, and I think it's pretty hilarious. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of expected to come, but I'm curious to see what it will be like as they head towards the season. But we got to talk about the Sabres here. So there's two preseason games going on. I believe the Sabres one's just about to conclude here, their second preseason game. Who has impressed in these games so far for you? I mean, JJ Peterka has been a standout ever since development camp for me. He's looked good at 5v5. He scored that one-timer goal off the pass from Anders Bjork in the other game. What have you thought of him so far?
I think he's made just leaps and bounds with his development over the past season or so. I mean, since they drafted him, I think he's added like much more offense to his game compared to when he was a draft prospect back in 2020. I think playing pro hockey in Germany, obviously that was an adjustment, but once he got more comfortable there, it seems like he added a little bit more playmaking to his game and a little bit more dimension. Put up pretty solid numbers last year, and he's put up pretty good numbers so far. And the Prospects Challenge, the preseason game so far, there's still some things about his game that he's going to need to adjust to. He still struggles kind of with like the pace of play, just with timing, playing the puck off the boards. You kind of seen tonight, but other than that, he's been a lot of fun to watch. Really quick player, not afraid to play with a bit of sandpaper to his game. And I think he's definitely going to be prospect to watch down in Rochester this season. And maybe he even gets time up with the Sabres eventually, because he's looking like he could potentially be a top 6 forward for the Sabres someday, which would be huge for a second-round pick.
Oh, definitely. Looking at his play in the DEL last year, he looked really good there. He really, I like the shot numbers. And, this is the deal with a lot of the European prospects the Sabres bring over. They usually do play in Rochester to start off. We saw that with Arttu Ruotsalainen last year. And we've seen it like for the past decade. It's kind of been like that. So it'd be pretty surprising if he just made the team out of camp. Not saying it can't happen, but usually even just looking at this staff that's currently in charge, they're leaning towards more of the development side and taking their time with it. So I have to imagine that's the case. And taking their time with it, I want to get your thoughts on Jack Quinn, because in a tweet tonight, you said that he still needs AHL time. Why do you think that? And do you believe that's going to actually happen?
Yeah, I think at this point, just with getting like 20 games this past season due to COVID, with his injury, only playing the AHL and World Juniors, I really just think he just needs more minutes. Just to kind of improve his game, just to kind of get back on track to where he left off after his draft year. I think tonight, really when he's been out there, the Sabres have just been kind of getting like slaughtered in terms of just like shot quality and just total shot attempts. And I think not all of that is his fault, but there have been some plays where he's just on the puck. He maybe hangs on to it for too long, doesn't find the best pass or the second best pass, leads to a turnover. Just in the second period alone, I think we saw that twice in about like an 8-minute sequence. And there's just things like that he just needs to work on, just needs to improve on. And I think that really just comes with the timing. I mean, getting used to the pace of pro hockey. And I think that's really something he could improve down in Rochester. And also, I mean, just getting back on his feet, just in terms of games played, just getting those minutes in. I think he's a guy that could definitely use Rochester. And I really don't consider him a player who really has a shot at making this roster after this preseason he's had. I mean, it seems like he's almost destined for Rochester at this point. So, I mean, he'll be interesting to follow. I mean, he wasn't my favorite pick when they picked him in the 2020 draft, especially with who was on the board, but he does have some pretty interesting traits. He's a pretty smart hockey player. He does have goal scoring abilities. So the Sabres can extract the best Jack Quinn they can get out of him. I think they should, try their best to do that. I think the best way to do that would be some time in Rochester.
No, I agree with you there, Walter. I mean, he only played in 14 games last season. And if you're looking at the baseline stats, 9 points in 14 games might seem decent to the eye. But when you dive into like those 5v5 shot rate charts that Chad DeDominicis puts out, and you kind of look deeper into his game, you can tell he still needs more work there because he just wasn't really, that great. Like he was like a replacement level player basically at the AHL level last year. And in terms of what he's displayed in the preseason, as you've mentioned, he hasn't really looked that great and in any area of the ice really. So yeah, I agree. He should be going back to Rochester. I mean, this is a unique opportunity for him as well, right? Because usually he would be going back to the OHL, but because of what's happened with this pandemic, he's now been granted, because he played enough games last year, he's granted access to go back to the AHL this year. So it's a great opportunity for him just because he's going to get to play against professionals, and he still will have that option to come up at some point if he really does dominate at the AHL level at some point this season. So, I mean, you have to hope it works out there because the individual skill with Jack Quinn's there. We've seen it in flashes, even in the development camp. We saw him make some nifty moves. He's a good player, a very high volume finisher, in terms of his shooting ability. And yeah, that question, should it have been Marco Rossi, should it have been Anton Lundell, is going to follow his career at least for quite a while until he really impresses himself. But he's on the team now, and ultimately this do its best for his development. And I agree, he should be going back to the AHL. So you think Jack Quinn's kind of disappointed so far. I just want to know who else so far in these 2 preseason games, limited sample size, of course, who has kind of been disappointing for you?
I think also just the goaltending in general. Luukkonen, he's looked solid tonight for, what he is as a rookie. But that first game, Aaron Dell, definitely like a bunch of pucks that he should have stopped that he didn't. And then Tokarski came in. He looked a little bit better, but still some pucks that he should have stopped. And really the only goal we haven't seen yet so far is Craig Anderson. And maybe he's going to be the best out of the 4. But just that whole area of this team, I think, is going to be a huge problem heading into the season. And I think the Sabres probably won't be the best team this year. Obviously they're projected to be like a bottom 3 team, but I think the goaltending could make it even worse. And I think the goaltending could also lead to them losing some games that they probably should win during this season. I doubt their goaltenders will win them many games with guys like Aaron Dell, who had, I think, like an .857 save percentage in the NHL last season, and Luukkonen. He's an inexperienced rookie. He hasn't really dominated the AHL yet. Anderson looked decent last year, but he's also in his 40s. And then, Tokarski, we've seen him last year. Once again, he's kind of just like a journeyman, like 3rd string goalie. So just that area of the team so far in the preseason has probably been the most concerning. And yeah, maybe it's just bad by design because they're trying to get a high draft pick this year. Because it definitely didn't seem like they tried to replace Ullmark with any like realistic top end goalie options. So we'll see. Obviously it's a rebuilding year, so I think it's better that they didn't spend too many assets on goaltending or hand out like a crazy long-term contract. But at the end of the day, I do think the goaltending will be a problem.
Well, let's expand on that goaltending question a bit. Do you think UPL should be coming up to the NHL this year and playing a full-time role, maybe in a tandem situation with Craig Anderson? Maybe Aaron Dell plays a few games there because, he's a 3rd string goaltender really as well. He's maybe going to get thrust into the backup position. We don't really know. Like, there's just so many question marks regarding this position. We don't know who the starter's going to be. We don't even really know who the backup's going to be. It's just all over the place. I want to get your thoughts there, but let's just start off. Do you think UPL is going to make the team?
I think he definitely has a shot at making the team. I think probably the best approach for the Sabres at this point, I mean, really with any goaltending developing, I think really just the heavy minutes approach is the best one. I mean, just put the goalie in a spot where they can get games, where they can like see a lot of action. And I think that either Buffalo or Rochester, I think he should be able to see a good amount of games. I mean, even if he makes Buffalo, I mean, like you brought up the tandem situation. I mean, that would be a situation I'd be fine with him being the NHL with. The only situation where I really wouldn't be too happy with him being in the NHL is if he's like a kind of just like a true backup goalie where he's playing like 1 out of every 5 games or something like that. That's a scenario where I do think he'd be better off in the AHL. But I mean, it definitely does seem like it's definitely an open goaltending competition. And I could definitely see a guy like Dell being sent down to Rochester to start the season, a guy like UPL making the season or making the team to start the season if he has a solid preseason. I mean, tonight, I think UPL has been okay. I think he's been better than Aaron Dell, but I don't think he's done enough to really separate him from the pack at this point. So, I mean, I guess we'll see. I think the Sabres, they definitely seem like the plan is to go with Anderson and Dell to start the season. I can't remember if it was Kevin Adams or Don Granato who brought that up, I believe last week at the start of training camp. But I mean, UPL, I think the goaltending, I think, is just going to be so bad that UPL is definitely going to make his way up at some point. I think he will see some games. I think it's really just a matter of time at this point. And I mean, a rebuilding year, I think it's a great time to do that, just to kind of see what you got with the young goalie, because you really don't got much to lose at this point.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be very fascinating for sure to watch the goaltending as the season goes forward. I want to dive a little bit into Dylan Cozens, though, with you and what role you believe he should be in, like whether he should be thrusted in to succeed this coming season, you know, because there were times last year. I mean, he actually did carry the Eric Stahl line when he was put on it in terms of the 5v5 shot rates and driving the play and other various stats. I mean, he didn't obviously have a great rookie season, but in terms of driving the play as the season went on, he did start to perform better. But he's now in a situation where he's kind of expected to be the team's first line center. And do you think that's fair to assume he's going to be first line center quality this coming season?
I think that would definitely be something that scares me, is expecting someone as young as Dylan Cozens to be a first line center, even with like how talented he is. I think like anytime you try to thrust like somebody that's barely 20 years old into like a top 6 center role without really any backup plan, it's definitely a risk. And I mean, that's kind of what the Sabres are doing this season. They really don't have a backup plan for the center position. I mean, it's kind of looking like it's almost set in stone that the top 2 centers will be Casey Middlestat and Dylan Cozens. And I do think Cozens will be the guy who will be able to handle that, especially at his age, just because, like I said before, just how skilled he is, how talented he is. And it seems like Granato's going to really push him this season. I mean, I know the only reason he played the second preseason game tonight was because Don Granato said he wanted to see more out of him. And I think, I mean, the first 2 periods of tonight's game, I think we really did get to see more out of Dylan Cozens. I mean, I thought he looked, much better than the first game tonight. Has some pretty good opportunities too that he was able to finish, but the opportunities are there. And I mean, we have seen that he has been able to finish at almost every level he's been at. So that's not really a major concern for me, but he's definitely a guy to watch out for this year. But I mean, at the end of the day, just the fact of him being so young and really no backup plan if he struggles, like really no place to shelter him on the wing with the veteran center if he does struggle, that's definitely something that does concern me. But I mean, once again, it's a rebuilding year. So, I mean, losing, it can be contagious. I mean, especially after this past Sabres rebuild, it seems like almost impossible to get out of this losing mindset. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think his development really won't be too affected by this rebuilding year. And I think, I mean, it's going to be a great experience for him in that top 6 center role, just with the centers he's going to have to match up against every night. I mean, he'll be playing the McDavids, the Bergerons, the Braden Points. I mean, just that experience, I think that's invaluable. So I think that's one bright side of the situation. But yeah, really no backup plan scares me, but guess we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, he's probably going to have a better season, you know, compared to his rookie year. He's going to have all the opportunity in the world to succeed playing, you know, with guys like Jeff Skinner, who I think will probably, you know, regress to the mean a little bit and probably, you know, be somewhat closer to somewhat of a top 6 producer, maybe having like, not only 20 points. Victor Olofsson as well, I think, is going to have a decent years. So, I mean, these are all guys that are looking to prove themselves. So you're putting them on the line. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I'm just curious as well, just to see how Dylan Cozens is going to do. And I mean, we're rooting for him. And, Buffalo clearly is. They sent him to the NHL media tour. There's people that believe he could end up being the next captain, which is just crazy to talk about, considering how young he is. And seeing what happened with Jack Eichel. Maybe don't do that just yet. You can wait, even though he does seem like he would do it. But, we don't really need to, overexert ourselves into that conversation just yet. But we got to talk about another member of the core in Rasmus Dahlin. And I just want to know from you, Walter, is this the season where he's going to break out as a superstar? I'm going to dive into some micro stats here. He was in the 32nd percentile over the past 3 seasons in terms of his even strength defense among NHL players. 32nd percentile among all NHL players. That's not very good when you're just looking at that specific micro stat. So he is a good power play quarterback as well. But in my eyes, I think he could still, he still has another level there, being in the 70th percentile among all NHL players. Like, I think he still could be like, what Quinn Hughes is to Vancouver and what Cale Makar is to Colorado. I think he could be among the best in terms of quarterback in the power play. So those are 2 areas where I would obviously like to see him grow there. I just want to get your thoughts on him as a player overall heading into the season, Walter.
Yeah, I think, he's probably the happiest player in the Sabres. Maybe outside of Jeff Skinner, to have Don Granato as his head coach this season, just because I think it opens up many more opportunities for him to grow his game now. Because, we've seen in Ralph Krueger's system, it was pretty much really heavy on forwards, carrying the puck up the ice, really doing most of the legwork on offense. And that really does not mesh well with Rasmus Dahlin's game, because he's a guy who kind of just strives in transition, strives on having the puck on his stick. And it's great when the puck's on his stick too, just because he's such a talented player. And I think we kind of just seen just a really unconfident Rasmus Dahlin the past 2 seasons. And I think just not being able to play his game on the offensive side of the puck, I think that kind of leaked over onto his defensive side of the game, where he was just making errors that he's really never made before. His best defensive results came in his rookie season when he was barely 18 years old. And then we've seen him regress, the past 2 seasons. So I think just with the new coach, just with one that, better fits a style of play that he wants to play, I think we will see those defensive results improve. He's not a perfect, technically defensive player, but he does have traits that should translate well in the NHL level. Once again, we've seen that in his rookie season. And really just unleashing the full potential of Rasmus Dahlin, just allowing him to be more dynamic, like all the things that Don Granato has been talking about so far in training camp. I think that's going to do wonders for his game. And I think he may finally be able to be placed in that conversation with guys like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. Maybe he'll have that type of season where he's able to put up, those type of offensive driving numbers. Some great defensive numbers too. I think Don Granato is a perfect coach for him to do that. I think Dahlin's probably really looking forward to a fresh start under a coach not named Ralph Krueger.
Oh, I definitely agree with you there, man. Because Rasmus Dahlin, we had a large enough sample size of him playing under Granato. Like, he was a completely different player, and that's just because of the systematics schemes that Granato was deploying compared to Krueger. He was actually able to activate into the rush as a D-man, which was impossible under Krueger's system. So in terms of letting him do what he's actually good at, what he was drafted first overall to be, I think he's definitely looking more like that player. And I think you can look at microstats like that and but you do have to add the contextual factors there, and I think you did a pretty good job there, Walter. I want to get to, I kind of want to talk about another Swedish prospect in our system just quickly, and Isak Rosen and his staggered development in Sweden thus far. After scoring a goal in his first game, he got to the point where he was barely even playing. He then got sent down to the Super Elite League, which is the Swedish junior league over there. And he is starting to look a little bit more comfortable. And, I've been keeping track, through the future of the 716 podcast, which is part of the Charging Buffalo network that you're in with Curtis and Austin over there. I just want to get your thoughts on this. Should Sabres fans kind of be worried about how he can't really play at the top level yet? Or, do you like it that he's in the super elite better and that it doesn't really matter because of other factors?
Yeah, I think he definitely has the talent to be playing pro hockey right now. I think like one of the concerns I've heard over in Sweden was just really his defensive side of the game, which I think you just got to gamble with him at this age and just have to try to work on his offensive side of the game. And I think the defensive side of his game will come. Just because he has so many tools to work with offensively, I think that makes him just such an exciting player. At 13th overall, I think he is really kind of maybe you could find as high risk. I think there's definitely some risk to him, but I think there's some high reward too, just with how skilled he is, the pace he plays with, his shooting ability, really everything he's able to do. He's got a great offensive toolkit to work with. And yeah, it's definitely disappointing to see him in the SDHL not getting the amount of ice time he probably should be seeing. I think today he got around 10 minutes, which is much better than we've usually been seeing. There's been some games where he hasn't even gotten a shift, or maybe he gets a few shifts. And I think it's definitely a better development place for him in the SHL right now. If he's getting 10 minutes a night, I'm fine with that. I just really don't want to see him getting a shift or two. Because I think, the junior level in Sweden, it's definitely a solid level. I think if you're in your draft year, maybe 1 year post-draft year, if you're like a second or third round guy. But I think for those top guys, we see those guys dominate the league in their draft year. So I think their post-draft year, I think they're just like kind of above and beyond the Swedish junior league. One option I do wish was available for Rosen was to be able to come over the CHL. No team drafted him in the CHL import draft. They're probably kicking themselves right now because I think that'd be a pretty good opportunity for him. We're seeing guys like Wallstedt and Fabian Lascelles who will be playing in the WHL this season. And I think that's an interesting development opportunity for some Swedish players, especially with that concern with ice time at the pro level. I think the CHL, I think that's kind of like the perfect medium between the Swedish Junior League and the SHL League. You're still playing junior hockey, but it's a bit higher level, has a bit more experience, older players, a bit more NHL draft picks playing in that league. So I think that would be my ideal option for Rosen. But at this point, let's just kind of see what he could do at the pro level. Hopefully he earns some more ice time as the season goes on. And they've got some experienced guys on his roster over in Sweden. Some guys with NHL experience. So I think just be able to learn from those guys, I think that's going to be great for him.
I definitely agree with you there. And yeah, it would have been awesome if he could have been drafted in the import draft and playing the CHL, but ultimately that didn't happen. So he has to kind of just go with the cards that are dealt. And, I'm sure the Sabres are talking with the Swedish team over there. They don't want him. Not that they can do too much about it. I'm sure Kevin Adams isn't the happiest about it because he does really believe in this guy. I'm sure you saw in the Sabres in bed video. This team was thrilled to get him at 14th overall. And the upside is there with them. I like the pick. So I'm just hoping he can get his development back on track over there in Sweden. Now we got the end off the Sabres talk here, Walter. I want to get some of your thoughts on Jack Eichel. I'm sure you're happy to do this again. When do you see a trade finally happening here?
Now that we're seeing his, now that the word that's come out is that his medical records are finally going to be released to other teams. It sounds like that was mainly due to pressure from the league and the Players Association. But I think that definitely opens up kind of just a bunch of trade opportunities for the Sabres now. It definitely hurts for them to finally do this like right before the season starts, like once teams already have most of their cap committed to players, like pretty much their rosters set in stone, like really don't want to make too many major ground shaking moves at this point. I think that will definitely hurt the situation a bit. But yeah, I think the medical situation, I think that one's going to be huge, really just because, with a player like of that serious of an injury or that serious of a surgery that Eichel is about to undergo. We're talking neck injury, neck surgery for a top line player. I think like the least you'd want to see before you make a trade for a $10 million guy is just his medical reports. And I think now that teams will finally be able to see that, they'll probably be, more open to, trading for a guy, because now they could actually value him properly. Because if they think the surgery, if they think the injury is going to have more of an impact than they thought before, they could lessen their offer a bit. If they think he'll be able to fully recover. I mean, their offer is probably going to increase compared to what it was before. So I'm hoping a trade happens soon, but I'm also at the same time not getting my hopes up. But I mean, as we all know, his no move clause kicks in once free agency starts. I think it's like July 13th this season. So I think a trade, I mean, I think I could guarantee that a trade will happen before then. I mean, the sooner the better, but I mean, I guess we'll see. I mean, I don't even think I could even make an educated guess on like what team will actually trade for him. I think at this point it's going to be one big surprise. So, I mean, I guess we'll see. I mean, I think the trade's pretty much inevitable at this point. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see.
No, I agree with you there. Like over the offseason, I was pumping the hammer that it was going to be the Minnesota Wild that acquired him because I thought they were going to go on a 1-year run with him and Kaprizov. But, the season's just about to get started here, and if this really drags on, then I don't really see that being a suitable option at this point. And as you mentioned, all these teams that could have been interested, like maybe even the Montreal Canadiens, ultimately decided to go with other avenues. The only team I could realistically see, trying to make it work is Vegas, because, Vegas will always try to make a trade work, to acquire a superstar in these circumstances. But, as all these insiders say, there's always one phone call, and things can happen. I don't necessarily think a trade's happening anytime soon until a surgery even happens, really. I think that's probably going to have to happen. Information out there, as Darren Drager's reporting. So let's reset the show here. You're watching Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to and like the show on YouTube, and catch the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com and on our Twitter feed at Sabres Scoop THW. Once again, we are joined by Walter, also known as @Sabermetrics on Twitter. So hopping into our general NHL news here, we actually got some news that broke right before the show. The Vancouver Canucks made a couple signings tonight that will make our producer Matthew Zader pretty relieved, as he's a Canucks reporter here at THW, so he can finally stop talking about this in his articles. First off, Quinn Hughes has re-signed to what is believed to be 6 years at $7.75 million AAV. It's pretty much confirmed, but the team hasn't confirmed it as of yet. I just want to know, Walter, what are your initial thoughts of this deal?
I think it's definitely interesting. I mean, just the term he got. I mean, 6 years. Obviously, it's not the full 8 years. So, I mean, it will take him into some UFA years, but it's not exactly like the Matthews contract where he gets 4 years that takes him right to his UFA years. So, I mean, I think the money's pretty much right where it's expected to be. And yeah, I mean, I think it's great that they're finally able to sign him. I mean, especially as close as it was to the start of the season. I think, most Canucks fans are probably relieved.
No, I definitely agree with you there. I mean, when I saw the AAV on a 6-year deal, I was actually pretty surprised, because I thought there was at least going to be $8 million there, considering that's how long it's been dragged out. But if there's one thing you can say that's positive about Jim Benning, it's all of the RFA deals that he signs, especially compared to those UFA deals. And I mean, Hughes is one of the best passers in the league. He's an elite power play quarterback, as we mentioned earlier. I mean, he's in the 19th percentile when it comes to even strength defense. So, and that's since entering the league, by the way, and it notably dipped to his second year opposed to his rookie season. So he's definitely going to have to work on that aspect of his game. But I think you kind of already know what you're getting with Hughes, and that's kind of his offensive ability. We got to talk now about Elias Pettersson, who's signing a contract for 3 years. And we don't know exactly yet. We know for sure it's under $8 million, and it does sound like it's going to be a $7.7 million AAV. What do we think of this bridge deal for Pettersson?
I mean, I think that's a pretty good value deal for the Canucks. I mean, in a short time window, I think for these 3 years, they're getting really, I think, a top end NHL player for, under 10 million, which appears to be like pretty much the floor going rate for these guys these days. So I think definitely buys Jim Benning some time to try to build something over the next 3 years. But that next contract, if Pettersson plays like the player he's been so far, and once the cap finally starts to go up, we could be talking major money here. So, I really think it's almost a win-win for both sides. But I think, Pettersson, that next payday is going to be crazy. And he adds these 3 years on top of it. I think he's the guy that makes out as a winner with this deal.
Oh, I agree with you, man. Like, if the cap does go up somewhat, within these next 3 years, and he even takes somewhat of a notable step and he becomes like close to a 90-point player, you're at that point talking about, is he going to get like a McDavid level contract over an 8-year term? And I don't know how the Canucks would necessarily be able to do that with the cap structure, but, we're also talking 3 years down the line. So we'll have to see. I mean, it will definitely be intriguing to follow, to see how that ends up. And something else that's intriguing to follow here is how do these signings impact Brady Tkachuk's pending deal in Ottawa that still needs to get signed? Is Ottawa, would you say, happier after seeing the Pettersson deal that will be used, as a direct comparable to him?
I mean, I think it almost seems like Ottawa's kind of in their own world at this point, especially with the way they're handling this Tkachuk contract situation. I mean, I know it seems like Tkachuk's are probably never the easiest to deal with in the negotiation room, but I mean, at this point, I think really just the way the centers are structured, I mean, you kind of just have to pay the guy. I mean, you're not going to trade him. You're not going to move on from him at this point. He's probably going to be a part of your team for a long time. So I really don't see the point of kind of burning bridges like this early on, which it seems like from behind the scenes, like it's definitely not like the prettiest situation. So I think, I mean, hopefully these deals kind of like put a fire under the Senators to finally get a deal done. Cause I mean, Brady Tkachuk's a pretty fun player to watch. I mean, once hopefully he's able to improve that finishing at least just 1 year, and I think he could be in that really high end tier of players. But even then, I think he's still a really effective NHL player, and I think he's going to be a big part of that Senators core going forward.
I agree with you there, and we'll see ultimately when it ends up getting signed. But, we're going to be doing a full right turn here in the show because this is a tough conversation to have, but it is really needed. So we're going to be talking about obviously what's been happening this past week in terms of, HC Kremenchuk's forward, Andrei Deniskin, who was suspended 13 games by the Ukraine Hockey League for a racial taunt towards HC Dundas's defenseman, Jalen Smereck. So being a white man myself, I can't possibly know what it's like to be a player of color and, just being a fan of hockey and seeing this happen. I saw Wayne Simmons today at the Leafs media availability say he might not even have his son go into hockey because of stuff that's happened like this. And he's been directly affected by this as well, as is every player of color really that's played in this sport. There's still massive problems in this area when it comes to hockey, and they really do need to be addressed. And, if there's any positives, I mean, seeing the outcry from the whole community is obviously something that can be seen as a positive, but the league's response, was clearly just ridiculous that he was only suspended. And the fact that, and here's the thing here, the club can play, the club can pay the equivalent of $1,900 and then he would only be serving 3 games, so 3 games after, all of this outcry that's gone on about it. It's pretty ridiculous for me. The IIHF, the International Hockey Federation, can still get involved here, and they can choose whether they want to suspend Deniskin from playing international in the future. We're still waiting to see what ends up going on there. But Walter, what have been your thoughts on this? And does it really, disappoint you to see the results as this story continues to develop?
Yeah, I mean, I think like once the story first came out, I mean, really just hearing all the players talk about on social media about how they're kind of awaiting like what the suspension ruling is. I mean, kind of out of the hope that it would be something pretty serious, that like the league would actually like crack down on this. I mean, really after all the racism we've seen in this game over, I mean, pretty much the game's existence, because it really has never really been a place where there's been a lot of like non-white athletes. I mean, that's just kind of been what hockey's been like for a long time. And I think that at times has led to like racist environments. I mean, kind of like we've seen in like the UHL with, I mean, that act that was horrible that we just saw. And I think it's definitely, I mean, just when that suspension came out, just like how disappointing that was when like the league finally had a chance to make a statement. I mean, you really think there'd be kind of just like a strict, like just no tolerance on racism, especially that blatant, like we see in the Ukrainian Hockey League. I mean, just to see a suspension that's barely anything. I mean, only 3 games and he can buy out the rest of the games. I mean, that's barely a slap on the wrist. I mean, we've seen bigger suspensions for, I mean, just like minor hits. I mean, minor like acts of play. And I mean, just seeing like something that serious, barely getting punished when the league had a shot to really send out a message. I mean, it's just disappointing to see. And I mean, I don't really know what the next steps are going forward with, I mean, with the IHF. I mean, what power they have over the suspension, because I know the player in question, I mean, he's only played, I don't think he's played internationally for Ukraine in like 2 or 3 seasons. So if they really only have power over his international representation, I really don't feel like that will be enough of a punishment. So hopefully the UHL, I mean, with all the eyes on them at this point, hopefully they finally step in and do the right thing. But I mean, even then, just their initial punishment, I feel like that's something that will always be remembered. And I mean, yeah, it's just not enough. I mean, especially, I mean, with really just with what happened, I mean, with how serious that is, only getting 3 games and being able to bow out the rest. I mean, yeah, it's just not enough.
No, I agree there, Walter. It really is not enough. And, the general manager of the Ukraine Hockey League was actually fired today after speaking openly against racism in this specific event. He took to Twitter to talk about it and said how this will not solve the problem and that it won't silence him. So, you already, I mean, you don't even, like, if this hadn't even come out, there wouldn't have even been a suspension, right? Like, it's just crazy. Like, the impact of social media nowadays has even brought this problem to us. So this just shows you this has been decades and upon decades of problems, and people will say, this is Ukraine, this is more of a problem in Ukraine. This doesn't affect us in North America. But I would tend to, counteract that argument with, it definitely still is an issue here in North America. We've seen it even at the NHL level still within the past, 5 to 8 years. You've seen multiple incidents of it, and you still see it at the AHL level. You see it at the CHL level. This isn't out of hockey yet, And I mean, in terms of Jalen's perspective, and that's kind of what's most important here. He's not suiting up for any more games as of now, understandably. That doesn't necessarily mean he won't do it again this coming season, but I would just have to hope that maybe some sort of, a professional team, maybe even an AHL one, gives him a tryout or an opportunity, because he actually is a pretty decent hockey player. Like, I think he could definitely make it to the AHL level at some point, because, what he's gone through over there, nobody deserves that. And I can't really, act like I know exactly what he's going through there, but nobody, any person deserves what happened, to him. So I hope, I wish the best for him. And yeah, we're going to take another hard swing here, because those are always tough conversations to have, but it needed to be said. So Jack, thanks for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it, and for having this discussion with me. Are there any projects of yours regarding the Sabres that you want to tease before we end the show?
I mean, really just this year at the Charging Buffalo, we're definitely going to try to do some more prospect related content. Really just with kind of the nature of what this season will be for the team. I mean, mainly a rebuild. So, I mean, definitely keep an eye out for that stuff. And like me, Curtis, Austin, Paul, we'll all be working on some really cool like prospect related projects this season. We'll also have like a lot of tracking stats and all that available for Sabres prospects over on like the Charging Buffalo website and the Charging Buffalo social media accounts.
No, I agree. That's going to be very useful, because we're in a whole other rebuild again in Buffalo. It didn't it just happened once, but it has to happen again, of course. But it seems like it's going to be done the right way this time. I'm very intrigued by many of these prospects, even the 4th and 5th round picks. Even a guy like Oliver Nadeau intrigues me in terms of how he's going to develop just based on his NHLE model stats, But that's a whole other discussion debating that. But anyways, Jack, I very much appreciate you coming on today. And we thank you for joining us, as this has been Sabres Scoop, presented by the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube once again, and follow us on Twitter at SabersScoopTHW. You also can't miss going over to morningskate.io to sign up for our daily Morning Skate newsletter, because you don't want to miss out on that latest and weirdest hockey news coming out every day. Don't miss out on all the great hockey content on thehockeywriters.com. It's just me, Jordan, and this has been Sabres Scoop. Until next time.